So, this was told to me by my dad over a drink recently. He'd gotten a little drunk and ended up admitting it to me. Said it's been too long now and he paid the consequences, so there was nothing to come back on him. Only reason I'm posting this. Uncle Mark was my favorite uncle when I was a child. He always invited me around to show me his airsoft gun collection, hide-and-seek parties with my friends, and even took us to the beach. He would always come with sweets for us and acted like one of us, another child who just wanted to have fun. But then, the day I, 7 years old, was meant to be going around because we were going for a ride to this amazing place. My dad was happy and cheerful for the entire day. He was going on about how much he loved the fact his brother wanted to be in his children's life, until he got a call. I was in my room, packing my stuff when I heard the most blood-curdling scream from my dad. He was screaming and raging. I heard him rip open our front door and slam it back shut with enough force to make the picture next to it fall off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long while after that, and he never told me why until we had this talk, but that shall be explained at the end. Mum had a lot of money saved up from a minor lotto win, so we were okay, and she always smiled and said, "Daddy is just away for a little while," because he was looking after me and my siblings whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around either during this time, but we did see him in town a couple times. Funnily enough, he ran away the moment my mum saw me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad came home, and I excitedly ran and hugged him. He hugged me right on back with a good squeeze. We had a party to celebrate him coming home. We had Perry food and cake, and all the usual stuff. I was just happy my dad was home, though. A week or so later, Dad sat me down with the other children and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be coming around anymore. When asked why, he just said Uncle Mark was a bad person and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and come find one of them. We all agreed because my dad always knew best after all. One day, a year or so later, 9 at this point, I'm coming out of school to wait for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either at secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I see Uncle Mark stood there with a big grin. I get nervous when he comes up to me, saying he's here to take me for a ride. I tell him I'm not supposed to talk to him, that he's a bad person like my dad said. Uncle Mark got this scary look on his face for a second, then told me it was all good and his parents had changed their mind and made to take my hand. That's when I saw my dad just APER. My dad punched Uncle Mark right in the face and little old me saw blood fly as Uncle Mark went sprawling. I didn't see much after that except Uncle Mark running away with my dad chasing him. He came back after a little while, sighed, and took me in a hug. He told my mum to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I knew there and then it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. And I was right. 5 years. 5 years my dad was gone. My mum eventually admitted to us that he was in prison for protecting us, and we all guessed he'd done something to Uncle Mark. And he had. Turns out Uncle Mark liked kids. He liked them a lot. And that day I was meant to go to his house. My aunt, Uncle Mark's wife, had called my dad and told him she'd found some pictures under her and Mark's bed of children, and she was scared of what to do because Mark was a big man, and it was later revealed he abused her, so she was scared to call the police on him. And my dad had gone into a rage and stormed over to his house. He'd smashed in the door to find Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt as she waved the pictures around in hysterics. My dad had beaten Uncle Mark within an inch of his life, Uncle Mark screaming he'd make him pay as the police had arrested my dad. Messed up thing was, by the time my dad had explained what guy he had done it, Mark managed to get the pictures, burned them, and scared his wife into saying nothing so there was no evidence. My dad was sent down for assault but made sure my other uncles and older cousins were around to protect us in case Mark came back. But oh no, Mark waited until my dad thought we were safe. And then, according to my dad, had come to kidnap me from the school right under their noses. Who would stop him? People didn't believe my dad when he explained Mark was a predator. They thought he was just excusing himself for attacking him. After all, the police hadn't found anything, and his wife said my dad was a liar, whereas my dad was the big angry guy with a few assaults under his belt already. So all they saw was my nice uncle here to pick me up. He had gotten away from my dad at the school. My dad had tricked, and it gave him the chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. Knew Uncle Mark would run home to hide and more than likely destroy any evidence he had gotten since destroying the last lot. He also knew the police would be on his tail for the attack on the school, so he didn't have long. Difference was, though, my dad had his car while Uncle Mark was on foot. So, he drove over and demanded to know if my aunt was going to lie again, after what Uncle Mark had just tried to pull. Now, I don't like my aunt much after what she pulled the first time, but I think in that moment she really realized what a monster my uncle was. He was willing to do this to her nephew just for pathetic revenge, for being called out as a predator. She said she wouldn't stop my dad or save Mark this time. My dad ordered her to get all the evidence she could as he waited for Mark to appear. She came back down with pictures. Lots of pictures. He then told her to go, wait 1 hour, and then call the police. He was ending this. And as Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, who had been waiting behind the wall of his garden, slammed him through the door of his house, and then proceeded to beat him to death in his doorway. He apparently, towards the end, couldn't see the floor through the blood. My dad was arrested on murder and did so without resistance, only saying he wished they'd done his job for him. But when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had attempted to kidnap me, and the fact that they had to face the fact they had allowed a predator to run free, he was instead charged for manslaughter, his lawyer stating my father had gone into a protective rage and had only intended to render him harmless. Funnily enough, no one argued in defense of the predator for my dad getting the murder charges. He said he didn't regret it, but that he wished he had done something else purely so that he didn't miss out on so much of my life. I told him I was forever going to be proud of him for that, and that I loved him. I was a bit shocked I wasn't told just why Uncle Mark was for so long. But my dad asked if it would have made it any better to be told as a child what he really was, or now as a man who can handle the truth. And he was right. Me as a child would not have been able to mentally handle it. I'm barely able to handle it now. TLDR, my uncle was a predator. Dad found out and beat the stuffing out of him. Uncle tried to kidnap me in revenge and ended up dead.
Next story.
I originally posted this story on another sub, but was told it belongs here. I beat the shit out of my sister and sent her to the hospital. Trigger warning. This post talks about SA and our escape. English is not my first language, so I apologize ahead of time. I 26 meters beat the shit out my sister, 23F, for sexually harassing my boyfriend, 25 meters. I can finally talk about this because all the legal proceedings have been dealt with. So I've been dating my boyfriend Mark for about 5 years. He's the best thing that has ever happened to me. He's kind, smart, understanding, and absolutely beautiful. When we started dating, he was a bit closed off and was afraid to initiate any form of intimacy. I at first thought it was because I was his first relationship and maybe he was nervous. 6 months into us dating, he tells me that between the ages of 5 and 12, he was sexually assaulted and ped by his mother. His father left when he was around 4. It fucked him up in the head for a while. And when it got out, his mother was arrested, and he and his 2 older sisters were put in the custody of their grandparents who they lived with ever since. He was placed in intensive therapy and still goes to this day. He's come a long way and has healed a lot, but he still has some days when he gets really depressed and cries. Part of his therapy was exercising. So about 2 years ago, he and I started doing some bodybuilding workouts. I toned up a lot. Put 20 extra pounds of muscle on, and he toned up a bit. Because we've been dating for so long and have marriage in mind, he told my family, a less detailed version, and they welcomed him with love and support. Now for my sister, Sally. I've suspected she's had a bit of a crush on him. She'll flirt sometimes here and there, but he never reciprocated, and usually ignored her. I've talked to her about it so many times, but she didn't listen. To make a long story short, I had gone out one Saturday afternoon with some friends to get some drinks and left Mark behind because he didn't feel like going. My sister had texted me prior to ask if she could borrow a few things from me: a sweatshirt, DSLR camera, and a third thing that doesn't come to mind at the moment. I said sure and to get it whenever. She went when I was out, unknowingly. When I came home, I found my boyfriend on the ground crying his eyes out, and my sister trying to calm him down. He was having a panic attack. It's never safe to touch him when he has an episode because he may act out violently due to his headspace. Her hands were all over him, and he was trying to push her away. Her shirt was also on the ground, and she was only in her bra. I tore her away and asked what the fuck she was doing. She said that she was trying on the sweatshirt when he walked in on her, freaked out, and went into an episode. However, Mark through his tears said she tried to touch him. I asked my sister if it was true, and she said no, but Mark again said she tried to touch him. We have cameras in the house, and I pointed it out to my sister. Her face went white, and I don't know what came over me, but I saw red. I can't remember much because I was so angry, but I beat the shit out of her. I can't even remember if I was the one who called 911 or her, though her beat-up state. I do remember kind of snapping out of it, because Mark was still going through his episode, and I could him cry louder, and I had to help him through it. It's all a haze. I broke my sister's nose, gave her a black eye, and bruised her ribs. She was in the hospital for a few days. Update. A lot of people messaged me to ask about context for my last post. 1. This all happened right before COVID hit, the end of 2019, and everything was just settled this last month. 2. The incident happened in our kitchen. The front door leads down a hall directly to our open kitchen, and to the right is our living room that leads to the bedrooms. 3. We have cameras in every room, but the bathrooms and bedrooms, because we have a Great Dane named Butler. He's black and has a white oval patch from his chest to his tummy. He looks like a butler who likes to get into everything, so we set up cameras to keep an eye on him while we're out. The cameras don't have sound recording. 4. My sister didn't or asked or escape Mark, but she did try to coerce him into sexual activities. 5. My sister didn't know I was out when she came over. I don't have the recording anymore. It was too painful to keep, let alone watch. Also, my memory of the whole thing is hazy, but the tape showed Mark answering the door. Again, our cameras don't have sound recording, but Mark said that when he answered the door, she told him that she was there to get my camera and sweatshirt. He said okay and let her in. He was watching the television, so he went back to his show while she walked into our room. She called out to him for help, and the camera showed Mark getting up to help her. I don't remember how long they were in there, but the tape showed Mark rush out of the room while holding his hands out as if trying to stop an attacker. My sister then emerged half naked while holding onto her shirt. Mark backed up into the kitchen, still holding his hand out. She advanced towards him. Mark said he was telling her to put her shirt on and to leave, but she kept saying something along the lines of, "Hey, it's okay. I just need some help, that's all. And you're a nice guy, just help me out a little." I think by that point, he was declining into a panic attack as he started shaking. My sister took that opportunity to hug him. She said she did it to try and calm him down, but the tape showed her kind of grinding up on him. He pushed her away and fell to the ground crying and screaming. She then got down by him and was trying to wave her hands through his hair. Her other hand was also moving up towards his crotch. I remember from the tape seeing Mark flinch backwards and try to push her away. She always moved back closer to him. A few minutes later is when I got home and beat her to an inch of her life. I can't remember who called the police, but the police had showed up, and my sister limped to the door. Well, I was trying to help Mark calm down. I kind of remember them asking questions and trying to help Mark calm down. They thought he was going into shock, so they put a blanket over him and the paramedics came. My sister was quickly evaluated and then brought to the hospital. Mark and I stayed behind because by that point he had started to regain control again. I remember my parents showing up and asking what had happened. I told them everything. My mom stayed with Mark and I while my dad drove to the hospital to see my sister. Mark and I pressed charges on my sister, emotional trauma and sexual battery. Class A1 felony where I'm from. My sister tried to sue me, a misdemeanor charge, but it fell through. With the evidence we had, my sister was sentenced to 60 days of incarceration with a bond of $5,000. No one paid. She also has to serve 200 hours of community service, and her name was added to his *X offender registry. She can appeal to the courts to have it removed after 10 years. She was also placed under a restraining order. On top of that, my sister owes us $25,000. I got a small slap on the wrist and have to do 50 hours of community service. Nothing too bad. My sister was cut off from the entire family and still is. Mark regressed tremendously, to the point that he couldn't sleep in the same bed as me for months. He was required to go into even more extensive therapy. He's come a bit of ways, but nowhere like he was before it happened. It will take a long time for him to heal. I consider myself bisexual, but I lean more towards men, while Mark is %100 gay. He finds the female body disturbing, to the point that we have had to skip over full female nudity scenes in movies. My sister knew of this. When I asked her why she would do this, she said that she thought she could change his mind. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm also not sorry.